Warning, the following program may contain coarse language, strong violence, and brief sexuality. This video is designed for a mature audience, and viewer discretion is advised. Childe of Shade Reviews, Review Number 8, Dragon's Crown. Fantasy. A realm where magic is an everyday occurrence, dragons and other mythical creatures roam the earth, and the sight and smell of adventure is all around. In a fantasy setting, anything can happen, and it's easy to see why so many video games adopt this setting of their own. Various games are set in this world, and while they may not be interconnected, they can usually evoke the same feeling of adventure. Dragon Age uses it to give players a sense of purpose with their adventure, and create an experience that the players will never want to leave. The Elder Scrolls Saga uses this to have players roam the lands in quest for glory, as well as learning about the new abilities of dragon creatures. The Soul series of Dragon's Dogma uses this setting to put you up against the vilest of beasts that mythology has to offer, and give you a battle like you never seen forget. Fantasy and adventure go together like chocolate and peanut butter, but oftentimes it is needlessly tied to the action RPG genre. It doesn't need to be that way. History has shown us that the fantasy can flourish in other titles like Golden Axe, Black and White, and even Diablo to a great degree. But still, they seem to always be stuck in the RPG genre. Fortunately, in 2013, Vanillaware agreed to this philosophy and released the fantasy brawler Dragon's Crown, with gameplay that calls back classic brawlers of its genre and a breathtaking art style that bleeds Vanillaware's design. This game quickly gained popularity in the gaming world for both good and bad. So does this Merle offer an odyssey that any opportunist will happily hop on? Or perhaps this painting should have stayed locked up in a fortress where no one can find it? Ladies and gentlemen, count your potions, ready your gear, and step forth through the gate into the realm of hype. Stories can be a major influence for a player to pick up a game and play through it, but to a small extent, games don't need them. There are several games, some of which that are very successful and fondly remembered, that really don't have a story so much as an excuse for the player to take part in the game. Unfortunately, Dragon's Crown falls right into that school of thinking, with a bare bones plot and rather unremarkable stereotypes of characters. You begin the game by picking one of 6 characters: Elf, Dwarf, Amazon, Fighter, Wizard, and Sorceress, each with their own vastly different movesets and abilities to track through the game with. After you are introduced to the basic tutorial, which gives you your basic movement and combat abilities, you are then quickly thrust into an uninteresting plot involving royal espionage and the summoning of an ancient dragon who threatens to destroy the world. Sound familiar? Well, it should, because it's basically every cliche in the tone of high fantasy and is only there to give players an excuse to travel the land, leaving behind only a trail of bodies. I would say that this is disappointing, but past titles in the genre have shown that spinning an emotional and gripping tale is its strong suit. At the very least, the side quests have a bit more effort put into their descriptions, but even then, that's all there is, text and a beautiful picture, other than the numerous inside jokes, references woven throughout the journey, which are all pretty awesome by the way, especially the Killer Rabbit one. That's kind of all I got. Overall, it's really not that offensive or awful in a sense, but at the same time, that's it. There's not really much more to talk about, and I usually short my reviews anyway, so let's free Tiki, no not that Tiki, from this cage and have her lead us to gameplay. Combat is often the core meat of the experience for most brawlers, and Dragon's Crown is no exception here. Each character has wildly different combat abilities, and they all play differently enough to make each playthrough feel fresh and different. For example, the Elf is extremely agile and can quickly take out enemies from afar with her bow. However, her physical damage output and defense are rather puny, so players usually have to make use of the dodge mechanic very often. The Amazon is a pure DPS character whose damage increases as her health goes down, and has a wide plethora of offensive abilities. If put in the right hands, she can be a devastating glass cannon that can cause an absurd amount of damage, albeit at the cost of dying fairly easily. The Fighter is a big Hulk-King tank that emphasizes both defensive and offensive play. He has buffs that increases the party's defense and a shield that can sometimes block incoming attacks, but he also packs a devastating ground pound and a mashable attack that will mow down enemy hordes. The dwarf is a sort of grappler slash special character with the ability to pick enemies up and then throw them, also with plenty of explosives to reinforce the stereotype. Great for providing that extra push your party needs and clearing a few rooms. Lastly, there's the Sorceress and Wizard, who are both pretty much the same character, with the Sorceress having more of a support role and the Wizard often using offensive spells. There's enough to keep players interested as they march through the game, and all characters are extremely enjoyable to play as, but what good would the combat be without an intricate loot system to accompany it? Luckily, Dragon's Crown has you covered there too, with a robust treasure system that rivals Borderlands in sheer amount of variety of different options. You acquire new weapons from the chests you find while on your various adventures throughout the game. It functions on an E through S rank system and is random for every encounter with a chest. However, not every item can be used by your class, and in some ways you are limited to certain options, even though each character is stuck with an individual weapon type, and stats are really the only things that are affected. Getting its shiny new bow can be a tremendous boost in confidence for taking on bosses. Speaking of bosses, this game has plenty of them, and they're interesting and fun to fight, when you're a high enough level, that is. My only real complaint about them is that after a while it can get old killing the Kraken for the 16th time. There are several things that Dragon's Crown has going for it, but still a couple things hold it back from being truly spectacular. If anything presented in the tutorial and your first run of the game doesn't interest you, well, you're not going to like this game. After acquiring the Dragon's Crown, there's only the option to replay the game on harder difficulties or reboot the quest all over again with little to no changes affecting either outcome. Unless you like the loot system or are just having a blast playing with friends, you might just walk away from the game a bit disappointed. Unfortunately, there's no demo for me to tell you to go try, and it's no longer a free PS Plus game, so there's no way to try it without going all in. Other than that, all I got left are little nitpicks about the controls. I have put several hours into both the PlayStation 3 and PlayStation Vita versions of the game, and it's safe to say that each version has their own perks. The PS3 version controls better and runs smoother, but spellcasting and cooking controls are a bit wonkier. The Vita version is mobile and benefits from having the touchscreen for players to quickly tap to get more money and cook faster, yet the frame rate can struggle in hectic situations. Really, the choice is up to you on which version you want to play. If you're out of the house a lot, feel free to get the Vita version, but if you're more comfortable with the controller, the PS3 version is slightly superior. And I think that's everything. In short, it's a blast to play with friends or by yourself, but it's a bit tad on the repetitive side. Now that this game has been slain, let's all gather around the campfire and admire the scenery that this game has to offer. I probably don't need to tell you how gorgeous this game looks because you've been watching it for a while now, and it looks absolutely stunning. Vanillaware is known for making some fantastic looking titles like Muramasa the Demon Blade and Odin's Sphere, and their first step into HD is remarkable. 2D sprite work is top-notch and environments are lush and contrasting like a painting. Almost every frame of this game can be put in a museum, and the amount of details for the game is like chocolate smothered all over a delicious sundae. From the various attacks and grab animations for each character to the way that they eat food and interact with the environment, it's clear that a lot of love and affection went into creating this game. However, not everything is peachy and clean, because there's the elephant in the room that we've noticed this whole time but have failed to bring up, which is the somewhat misogynistic art style. Yes, guys, I know this has been a staple of Vanillaware's games in the past and is very attractive, but there's the fact that it's still there and I can see it alienating many female players. Pretty much any woman in this game that isn't the elf has cartoonishly large breasts or butts, and followed by a rather unnecessary amount of skin being shown. Even worse is the fact that when some characters are grabbed or knocked down, they assume rather questionably provoked positions. While some of the male characters aren't spared either, with some having ridiculous proportions and builds, they don't outnumber the various females in the game too. Yet there are still plenty of reasonably sized and anatomically correct males in this world. I don't know, guys. All I really gotta say is if you made it through this video without getting too enraged by the images, you're probably okay, but just be prepared to see some interesting pieces of art and characters throughout your journey. As I said before, the game is gorgeous with top-notch sprite animation and a pleasing if somewhat questionable art style that I think many will appreciate. Definitely a plus in my eyes, and I think that the game is stronger for it. You hear that? It's the Harpy song. Let's go see what she has to say about sound. As far as sound goes for Dragon's Crown, it's pretty good if somewhat bland at the end of the day. Like many fantasy soundtracks, it's full of choirs, orchestras, and vocals, and enchanting melodies that are pleasing to the ear and make good ambient noise. However, as you play the game more and more, the realization that it's not really memorable begins to settle in the back of your mind, and you quickly begin to forget them. While the tracks are fine to listen to on their own, they really only reinforce the fact that they're background music and only there to occupy space. It doesn't help that there's no official soundtrack release either, so track names are only tied to levels, bosses, and menus, which add to the overall blandness. But that's not to say that the soundtrack is bad, more it's just kind of there. Pleasing, but not exactly what I'd call special. With all that out of the way, there's one more thing to talk about, which is the voice acting, or more specifically, the narration of the game. Much like Bastion and Transistor, there's a single overarching narration of the events taking place in the game. And the actor Ryotaro Devin York provides a good performance. He's not amazing in it, but he plays the part fairly well and helped me push myself through the rather lengthy tutorial. But luckily, he's not the only option, for if you buy the DLC, which I recommend by the way, or save up enough currency, you can purchase the narration voice of the characters you played at. If you have a certain attachment to those characters, this is a great option. For Everyone provides a stellar performance as well, but like I said before, that feature is locked behind the DLC barrier and costs only 100 million gold per character, so I could just suggest you fork up the $2 to buy all of them. Does it suck? Yeah, kind of, but it's cheap and it's the kind of DLC I like, so I'll give it a free pass. With all that out of the way, let's pour the secret sauce on this dish and come to the moment we've all been waiting for, which is the conclusion. Dragon's Crown was somewhat of a surprise for me because of how much I enjoyed it. It's a really entertaining and beautiful brawler with an addictive loot system and wonderful combat. However, it's by no means perfect due to the developers barely even trying with the story and in the unfortunate choices Vanillaware made when picking the game's art style. Nevertheless, this is probably one of the best brawlers I've ever played, with it having a long playtime that can go on infinitely if I wanted it to, and combat that was always interesting whenever I played. I put over 60 hours into the game and even got the platinum for it, and if that's not an estimate for the game's quality, I don't know what is. It's fun, it's beautiful, it's definitely a recommendation that I would give to anyone who has an itch for playing a modern rendition of the classic brawlers of old. And at the end of the day, that's all I really wanted for it. So after collecting 9 talismans that no one bothered to mention until after I explored the entirety of Highland and slaying an ancient god hellbent on consuming the land with fire and despair, I have decided to give scores appropriately to story, gameplay, presentation, sound, and overall enjoyment of the game. Starting with story, which gets a rather disappointing 4.75 for barely even trying, but for at least having some clever winks and nods inside of it. Gameplay gets a good 8.75 for maintaining an addictive formula with plenty of variety and things to do, but also keeping in mind that it gets somewhat repetitive. Presentation gets a spectacular 9 for having a lush painterly art style that I can appreciate, if only it took some elements away from it. Sound gets a pleasing 6.75 for having a nice yet forgettable soundtrack and some strong performances to carry it through. Lastly, there's enjoyment, which I give a good 8.75 for being entertaining and providing a great time sink for me. Tallying all these scores up, I ultimately give Dragon's Crown a respectable 76% and give the recommendation to buy it. While it falls flat in some areas, Dragon's Crown is a really enjoyable game, and if you're a D&D buff with a taste for brawlers, this game definitely has you covered. It may not be the best brawler ever, but it's a nice substitute and will likely keep you and your friends entertained throughout your journey. So you may be wondering, well that's nice and all, but how do I get a hold of this game? Luckily, Dragon's Crown has been published by Atlas, king of the obscure yet highly polished games, and is available on both PlayStation 2 and PlayStation systems. Keep in mind this game is only available on those systems and has little hope of coming out on any others. The review has been primarily done in the PS Vita version of the game, but plenty of time has been put in the PS3 version as well. As far as the price goes, the game usually goes for $15 to $20 for the physical release and $40 to $50 for the digital version. I have both the physical and digital versions of the game, and the difference between the two are negligible at best. It is available from all major retailers and PSN, but if I had to tell you where to buy it, I would say pick it up from Amazon for about $20 and see if you like it. For other game recommendations, I'll first point you to a personal favorite of mine, which is Scott Pilgrim vs. the World. It's a fun and entertaining brawler that is a blast to play with friends and has plenty of quirks and a great visual style to accompany it. Next, I'll point you to the much underrated Towerfall Ascension. for its unique focus on multiplayer and an equally entertaining fantasy aesthetic. But I will warn you though that I have not completed that game as of this recording, so I do not know how the quality consists throughout the game, so feel free to let me know if I'm right or wrong about that. That's it for me, folks. Thank you for tuning into this review, and be sure to leave a comment about any mistakes or errors I made with this video. Any to all criticism is appreciated, and I look forward to the discussion below. Thanks again for tuning in, and look forward to suplexes and spellcasting in my next review. This is Childe of Shade signing off, and I'll see you next time.